Okay, we should be live.
Okay.
So I want to thank each of you for agreeing to take part in this discussion. The impetus on my part was these last few days have been very disorienting for me, and my response, of course, was to write something for my congregation, and it still felt like my congregation could have written it for me because they knew exactly what to expect from me, and it didn't really change very much. So I wanted to invite each of you both to speak to my community and yours as well. And maybe we can think together about things that really can help to fix what is broken. So for everyone who doesn't know the people who are joining me on the call, I want to welcome Iman Farhan Siddiqui, who is the Iman at wait, I have it right here, the MCNJ, the
Yes.
Muslim Community of New Jersey, who joined us, what, 2 years ago in this
Uh,
community?
yes, this is, I
Within
will
this,
be completing my third year, end of July.
welcome. And the Reverend Dr. Fred Gary, have you also been here 2 years now, or is this just the end of your first year?
No, the congregation is lucky. I've only been here a year and a half, so the damage is not complete yet.
Well, wonderful. And we'll refer to each other by first name because we are colleagues, and I feel very lucky to have you all as colleagues. I'll say Fred reached out to me almost as soon as he arrived. We've had some wonderful conversations. And then finally, Reverend Dr. Ronald Owens is kind of the dean of the Metuchen clergy, along with Jim Miller at First Baptist Church of Metuchen. He's really been the person not only with the second longest tenure here, but really someone who's led the rest of us and has served in a number of capacities, including not only being the senior pastor of the New Hope Baptist Church, but also on the board of directors of Faith in New Jersey and the board of directors in the National Baptist Convention. And I was looking through your bio, and there are at least a dozen other posts that you have held. So thank you all three of you for joining me.
My pleasure.
Glad to be here,
Good to
Aaron.
be with you.
Yeah. So the first question that I had asked, or that I thought to ask, was how are you feeling right now, given the situation in this country and the situation in our community and the situation in your own community? What personally are you feeling, not as a leader of your community, but as an individual? And I'll let anyone jump in.
Well, since I'm the oldest and probably have seen more than anybody else, I'm sort of a veteran of the civil rights movement of the '60s, and somebody had asked me the other day how I felt about what was going on. I definitely mourned the death of George Floyd, which has ignited a fire not only in our nation but around the world. And unlike the '60s, the civil rights movement of the late '50s and '60s, I'm encouraged and surprisingly encouraged because this is not something that is led by any particular ethnicity, but we find a majority of white folks holding up Black Lives Matter, um, no peace, no justice. And we see these marches and around the world holding up the name of George Floyd. I think I think we're at a pinnacle in our history in the United States that has had the sinful blot of systemic racism um, for at least for Black people for the last 400 years. In fact, 401 years this year. And so to see the outpour of this new generation of young people, irregardless of race, creed, um, ethnicity, they're marching in the streets for justice, not just for George Floyd, but I think justice, fair justice for everyone.
Yeah.
And so I'm encouraged. I think we need to seize the time, seize this moment in time to change the United States and this serious darkness of hypocrisy that we have had over the years, from the founding of our nation. Literally, many of the signers of the Constitution and writers of the Constitution were slave owners themselves. So it started even then. And so I think that we're in a point now where we can really take advantage of making some changes that will be that will impact generations to come.
Farhan, what are your experiences?
I would say upset, confused, and appreciative. These are probably the emotions that come to mind when talking about the subject. Upset in the fact that this individual unfortunately had to lose his life, but also appreciative of a lot of the emotion that's behind this. And I do see the frustration, and I do understand the frustration. Saying that there are a number issues of racism that are coming up and that are being brought up. The thing that I'm upset with my own immigrant community, and when I talk about the immigrant community, I'm predominantly talking about the subcontinent and the Arab community, is how we still feel the need to dictate on how to respond. I don't think that it is our place to determine the response to this. I think there needs to be more dialogue. I think there needs to be more conversation. Because while we do experience racism, it is very different from the Black American experience. And what I mean by that is that there's more likely that we will be associated with terrorism than we will be with police brutality. And it's important to recognize that, and it's important to embrace a lot of these concepts. And this like I said, I'm really upset of this fact that I fear there are other imams and there are other spiritual leaders who are just kind of dictating the direction that this needs to go. We should be followers in this. We should not be the ones who are leeching, or like marching forward, because we don't know exactly what it is that is being perpetrated and that's happening. We stand against oppression, and I don't think there's anybody out in the streets today who's saying oppression is good and we need to increase oppression. Everybody's against it, but we need to really come up with a multi-pronged attack on how to deal with it. And there are some calls that and because of my ignorance that I'm just not hearing. The superiors of this individual, are they being called to account? The policymakers in that state, are they being called to account? What are the policies that they had put in place? And I always tell people that one of the best ways to cause change in a lot of those systems is to attack those people's wallets via lawsuits, and how to view the looting, how to view the riots. Again, those things are being dictated by leaders, and some of them saying that, this is wrong, and some of them saying this is out of outrage. And I'm not here to have that discussion because I'm not part of it. And I want to be part of it if I'm allowed to be included, right? And I think that's really important. But these are just some of the takeaways that I have personally. As a leader, I'm probably one of the few leaders who hasn't come out and spoken openly about this, because I'm still at that stage where I'm trying to intake a lot of this and get some direction from the Black American community and be like, okay, what are your expectations from us? I don't mind standing supporting you, but the thing is, if you're asking for money and I'm giving you a car, or if you're asking, if I'm not giving you what it is that you need, and I don't want to be a barrier, I want to be a facilitator, if that makes sense.
And Fred?
I think in a lot of ways I'm a lot like Farhan, that I'm looking to listen more right now. And one of the things that I listened to this week that really, really helped was I found the eulogy that Barack Obama gave in 2015 in Charleston. And he had a line in there that just was haunting. He said, before we return to our silent complacence. And, I don't know what the conversation is going to be, but I hope we don't do that. I don't know what the way forward is going to be. To me, I spent a couple of years studying anger, and there's so much anger right now. And one of the things that's very confusing to me is and I don't know how to say this the right way, but it felt like the pandemic was an awful lot to navigate. And into the pandemic steps this swirling cauldron of anger, which is justified. I mean, absolutely not questioning that at all. But it makes me want to know where to go in this once the anger settles a bit. Not to retreat, not to go back to that complacent silence, but to find that way forward. Because I truly believe, and this is one of the things I say a lot, is that I'm very hopeful in this next generation that they are not resigned in the same way that I think my generation has been to the larger issues. You know, the systemic racism. I think my generation kind of shrugs its shoulder and says, "Too big, too much." Okay, where do you start? Like you're saying, Farhan, where do you begin with this? Mm-hmm. But I think my generation didn't even ask your question, and said, you know, it's too big to even start. Not where do we start?
Yeah.
And so I found myself surprisingly hopeful this week as I've been watching all these things unfold. And one last thing. So on Facebook, as I'm exploring my profound social media skills, I asked people that I know on Facebook to tell me, what are they praying for right now? And one person wrote on there that they're praying that we would realize all lives matter. And I always, for reasons that I just justify, don't like that response, but that was their prayer. And then I had someone come in and reply to it. And she said, I just found out that people who are struggling with this right now really don't appreciate when you say that. And here's the reason why. And she said it with such grace and kindness. Like, I just found this out. And I want to share it with you. I thought, that's a different response than maybe 30 years ago or 40 years ago. I found this out, and I want you to know. It gave me hope. So surprisingly hopeful.
Nice to hear, and I'm glad I've asked, because my visceral response has just been confusion, that I know what I teach and what I say from the pulpit, and it just feels like I can continue to say those things. And I'm so lost at how to actually make them more real in the physical world around us. So I thank you for that model of just trying to encourage and trying to foster that kind of graceful learning together, because that's probably how we'll move forward. And my next thought, and Fred, that was a great segue. If the first question was, what are we feeling ourselves? What are we sharing with our communities right now? As it feels a little bit self-aggrandizing to say a leader of a community, but at least as someone that people are looking to, how have you been trying to help hold this and guide and lead for the people that are looking to you?
Well, one of the things that I share with my congregation and have over the years is that injustice anywhere is injustice everywhere. Mm-hmm. And because we are silent, it causes us to, no matter how much we have a willingness to help the matter, being silent is not the way. And I think that one of the things that I shared with another group of clergy, that each of us who are proclaimers of our faith, God has held us responsible for making sure that our people are not only spiritually fed, but throughout the scriptures, we have had to deal with tyranny. We've had to deal with prejudices. And I shared with you that I shared with Eric that and with David that one of the things that the Jewish community and the African American community have in common is the fact that each of us, each of our our our, our groups have endured slavery, to be less than a man, to be less than a person, to be held at the level of a cow or to a horse or a goat, sometimes in slavery less than that. Um, and the crying out of people for freedom is something that has had to endure. So for the Jewish person to go from bondage in Egypt to bondage in Germany, and to find a homeland that they could call their home, and still even now dealing with their homeland in such a way that there's a racial divide. I think that we can identify with the fact of the frustrations that Black people have today, in the sense that after 400 years, we still don't find ourselves equally, equally. Um, um, my phone was ringing.
Yeah.
Equally, in fact, I'm gonna move that phone in a minute. Equally, losing my thought, but we find ourselves after 400 years still not equal in the sense of society. And I have told my people that we should not strike out in anger, because some people who have had what we call white privilege in their lifestyle, they don't know they were privileged, because they were born in that status. It wasn't them that took that status. They were born in it. It's like my children were born in a very kind of exclusive way, because I was a professional. I was a medical person for so many years. So my income was at a situation where they went to private schools and had the luxury of a level of finances that not most Black people have. So they didn't understand what the struggle was that I went through. They were children of privilege, and it wasn't because of them. It was because of their parents. And so I tell my congregation, understand that you have to be patient with those who, they're not complacent to be complacent. They're complacent because they really cannot identify or understand what we've gone through until they're put in a situation where that happens. For you, Eric, your people historically have a history of struggle, and so it's not hard for you to remind people of where the Jewish people have come from and the struggle they had to go through, and the Holocaust, and all of the things that were related to your race as well as your religion. And so even for Imam, I was on a pilgrimage to Israel, and we had some Arab named people on the tour. So when we got to the customs, most of us went through easily.
Yeah.
But everybody who was Muslim name or looked like they were Muslim, they carted them off to the side and tore all their luggage apart. This one poor girl, she's an American with a Muslim name, and she doesn't even practice Islam. And they tore her baggage apart. And I mean, literally pulled everything out of it, and everything disarrayed and everything. So you can you can feel prejudice in each of those places and identify with it from your own perspective. And I think that that's where we as pastors have to say, or faith leaders have to say, from your own experiences. And those of us who have not that experience, then we have to do, what Fred has said. We have to listen. We really have to listen. And I think that that's something that our nation has not done. They have turned a deaf ear to the cries of people, not just African Americans, but to the cry of so many people. And and listen, and we're not just talking about criminal justice here.
Right.
When we talk about pandemics, we have a pandemic of a virus, and there's an inordinate amount of Black folks dying more than white folks with the virus, not because of anything that we have physically, but it's basically the zip code that we live in. We have inequality economically. We have proportional unemployment that is twice the percentage of what we represent in the United States. We have the lack of justice. Out of 100 police killings in these last few 100, only two policemen have been prosecuted to the length of the law out of 100. So when we talk about this, it's something that we have to share with our congregations, that when Dr. King said, when one is bound, all are bound, and when one is free, all are free. And I think that it has to be a voice that we gently, I don't mean we have to go off the deep end, and have some civil rights movement in our church or synagogue or, mosque. I just think that we have to sensitize our people to the plight of other people, and especially now with African Americans in the United States. We have to. Yeah.
Fred, what have you shared with your community?
Well, the message that I was planning to share this week, I didn't preach last week. Justin did a great job. And what my plan though was to share a little bit of the struggle with cynicism, because a number of years ago, I think I really retreated, believing that the only change of the heart is what I was called to be about. Change in community or change on a national level, I'd lost all faith that I could be about that. And about 5 years ago, I began to see what that cynicism was doing, and that you have to change the heart, but you also have to change the community, and you have to change the nation. They all have to work together. And so for me, it was share a little bit with them this journey towards realizing, if you overcome the power of vengeance in your own heart, where you are no longer seeking an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, and you live that way, that's a profound thing.
Mm-hmm.
But if it stops there, it really becomes it loses its value. So if you're resisting the temptation of vengeance without consequence for your community, without consequence for your nation, then you've missed it. I think the other piece that I want to share to the community is just this idea that I really believe we're at a tipping point, and I'm hopeful about that. I have so much optimism about what's going to come of this, because you know, like Ron was saying, you know, folks in Paris and London are talking about George Floyd, and some part of me, I struggle with his family, that they're gonna lose their loved one twice. They're gonna lose them to violence, and then they're gonna lose them to a symbol. But on the other hand, he may live twice as well, and that we need that moment, that place where you from here I go, and I think we're in the Hebrew tradition, they call it an Ebenezer, where you stop and realize where from whence you came and where you're going. I think there's an Ebenezer here.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
So I
And
may be,
I say that I say that mostly because I like to say the word Ebenezer. That's a wonderful word.
so I'll look forward to dialing in on Sunday to your sermon, and that sounds great, and what I need to hear. And Farhan?
So there are a number of protests that are being organized by different Muslim organizations, and I think one of the unique standpoints that we have as a community is that we have the immigrant community and we have the Black American community, and both of them represent large numbers of Muslim Americans. So this is actually positive in the sense that you usually don't have great cooperation between those two communities, but now there is a lot of increased dialogue, which is definitely appreciated. There are so CARE, ICNA, and MAS, and there's Majlis Shura in New York. All of them are helping either organize protests, or they're participating in them locally. Faith in New Jersey is also arranging vigils and other things that are, you know, we're helping to try to make the community aware of, because I think it's also important to understand that there is going to be a spectrum of opinions on how to deal with this. We all agree that oppression is wrong, and we all agree that it shouldn't happen. But I don't feel personally, as a faith leader, that I can dictate to my congregation on this is the way that you need to deal with this oppression. And I think that for some faith leaders, a lot of their political bias, it shows when it comes to these things. But so a lot of people will be very surprised to find out that in my congregation, there are people on both sides of the spectrum. So instead of me polarizing the community, I really want to encourage them to act independently, as long as we all agree and understand that oppression and killing is wrong.
Great. And again, I opened our discussion by saying I'm dissatisfied with the way I've responded so far, because I don't see a change based on how I've responded. But whether it's my own failing or just where I fall in our tradition, I've been sharing stories. The story of the Exodus, as Ron was saying, for us, that was a crash course in empathy, to understand it is our obligation to treat others with compassion, because we know what it's like not to be treated with compassion.
Yep.
And what I sent to my congregation was a rabbinic story, a midrash, that explains why God picked Abraham to reveal God's self to. And the midrash, the allegory is that Abraham was walking on the road and saw a palace in flames, and no one seemed to take notice. And Abraham said, how can there be a palace without an owner? How can no one care about this? And then the king stuck his head out the window and said, I'm the owner of this. And at that moment, when the king, who's an allegory for God, who stands for God, noticed that Abraham saw what was wrong in the world, that's when they formed a relationship, a covenant. That we look out, we see the world as a flame, and it's our job to notice. Where I felt inadequate is what to do with that awareness. And so I'm really grateful to hear all what you're doing with your communities. My last question.
Can I
Yeah.
just share a scripture from the Talmud? It really is one that is profound in the sense of what we've used and what I've used. It comes from Second Chronicles, 7th chapter and 14th verse. It says, if my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways. Then I will hear from heaven, and I will forgive their sin and will heal their land. I think it's a powerful message. This was given to the Jewish people in the sense of the Almighty God declaring to them that if they followed the commandments of God, if they repented from the sin that they had, all of the tyranny and all of the foul things that were happening in that period of time, that God would hear them from heaven and heal the land. And I think that we're at a point now where people seriously are repenting, whether they are the advocates of prejudice, or whether they are the bystanders that did nothing about the prejudice. They have to now come together and say, listen, I'm repenting from that. And now, and I'm not talking about our generation. I really mean that. I said this, and I don't want to dominate, but when my children were growing up, I told this story to another clergy group. When my children were growing up, I'm the first African American in my community. I moved here in 1977 from my from my first home to this home. And I was the first African American to move to this community, and I was received with a cross burned on my front lawn 1 month after I moved in here. I mean, a large cross. I mean, 4 feet high. Crossbar was 3 feet long. Wrapped in cheesecloth, soaked in kerosene, and I mean downright Southern kind of style, Ku Klux Klan cross.
Dr. Ron, you are worth the effort.
They knew what they were doing, yeah. So I received that. But my children, again, were children of privilege, and I am. I really have, as a Black man, white privilege because of my reputation, because of the many things that I've done and involved myself with. I'm very recognizable, and of course I have tremendous privilege in the state of New Jersey, if not in the nation. And so I understand that privilege as a Black man, that wherever I go, I get the best seats, I get all kinds of things. But needless to say,
which is why it's always a privilege to eat with you.
Yeah.
Yeah, you get the better seat that way.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's right. But needless to say, I was challenged. And this is where the insidious disease of prejudice comes. I was challenged by my children. When they went to school, to the private school that they went to, my daughter came home. Probably she was in maybe the 4th grade, I think, and she was so excited. She had met a girlfriend whose name was Mary Ann, and she was so excited. She came to me and she said, "Daddy, I have a best friend." I said, "Really?" She said, "Her name is Mary Ann, and she is just like me." Well, my prejudicial mind of the late 50s and 60s got engaged, and the first thought that came to my mind is, is Mary Ann Black, or is she white? It came to my mind. And I thought I was a very liberal guy. I mean, I'm angry at white folks that call me that name and everything, but here I am now, questioning in my mind. So I had a decision to make then. The decision was, should I now impart that disease on my daughter? Or should I hold my peace and let her enjoy the friendship of that young lady, irregardless of race, color, or creed? So I held my peace. Thank God I did, because Mary Ann was white. But you see, my daughter didn't see her color.
Yeah.
She saw Mary Ann just like her. They like the same dolls, they like the same games, they like the same things at that young age. And so Mary Ann grew up in my house, and Tracy, my oldest daughter, grew up in Mary Ann's house. with no sense of color. My daughter now, Tracy, is 51 years old. Marianne is 51 years old. Tracy and her husband are the godparents of Marianne's children. And Marianne and her husband are the godparents of my daughter's children. You see, I could have poisoned my daughter at fourth grade level and told her, what is Marianne, white or black? And now Tracy would have seen the difference between she and Marianne based on color.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that we have to, as a generation that comes before this generation, be very careful not to impart our prejudices, no matter how innocent they are. Because, you know, innocence, I mean, why wouldn't I ask if she's white or black? I'm not prejudiced. I like white folks, I like Fred just like I like myself, you know.
Easy.
But to taint somebody's mind to see a difference because of color skin or economic status, we now unintentionally sometimes impart those things on our children that now cause them to see differences in other people. And I think that that's where our generations, mine and all of you behind me, are challenged today. Not to take our prejudices, our own experiences, and taint the generation that now is marching and the generation now that is white holding up Black Lives Matter. Because if we do that, we perpetuate this sin in the land that God wants to heal. And the only way it's going to heal is if we repent from our wicked ways.
And I'll again thank you all for everything you've offered. We'll call this sort of a lightning round because I know I've taken up a lot of your time and I really do appreciate it. But the last question that I mean, now that we are at least on the same screen together, what are a few things that we can do together? How can we help and support each other? How can we help each other feel like we're not facing this either alone or just with our community, and that we are really one larger community? So Farhan, it's your turn to go first.
So I would suggest two things, and I think they're very important. Number one, awareness, and really understanding what it is that's going on, understand the types of oppression that are out there, and understanding the ways that we can actually fight against them. And the second one is accountability and a call to it. I think this is very important, and I find that this is very much lacking in the political sphere. I find this very much lacking in the journalistic sphere also. In that we're not calling people to account. If they make mistakes, they need to be called out. And this accountability, it shouldn't just be the officer that was there. It should be his superiors. It should be the politicians that are involved. And I know it's the concept of writing to a politician is not as romantic as going out in the streets as protesting. But I personally feel, and I could be wrong, that is far more effective than the protest.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Dr. Owens.
Me?
Yeah.
Oh,
Ron.
I thought I had all my say, but I think that one of the things that we can make visual to our congregations is what we have here. I think that the blessing that I have seen in our community over the years is the fact that we are not just colleagues, but we are friends. And that when people see us, they shouldn't see us as individuals. They should see us as a collective group of clergy, faith leaders that have a personal relationship. They should see that we now, irregardless of our differences in our faith and everything, or our traditions, that we have a common binding that goes beyond that we see each other for who we are personally, and we can dialogue like this. And I think that that's the first thing that our communities need to see, we're not a separate group of clergy people. You know, you on one side of town, me on the other, and you know, Farhan on another, and Fred on another. They should see us as a unit. I think that one of the things, and I said this to Fred, he's so bashful, but I think one of the things that blessed us when my wife was in the hospital was the time that he spent, which was about an hour, um, sitting and talking with my wife and having her laugh and enjoy. He didn't have to do that, but I believe because of the relationship that we had, and I think that it drew us closer together. Basically, hearing about who he was, where he came from, and his background, it made him now not a stranger, but somebody that was a kindred spirit. And I think our congregations need to see that. They need to see us together. They
Yeah.
need to see this that we are talking about in the sense of the dialogue. And I'm thanking you, Eric, for bringing this about so that it can be seen by our communities. But the second thing, I think
Wait,
that,
wait, 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 wait. Before you get to the second one, hold on to it, because I got to interject here.
yeah,
I like you, but you have a better half, and I've got to find out who this is. So there, it wasn't an ecumenical effort on my part, Ron. It was just intrigue that, well, this is going to be a remarkable person, and of course it was true. So your second point now, go ahead.
and for all the rest of you, I was a little jealous of how my wife received him in that hospital room. She was more excited about him being there than me being there.
Uh,
The second thing is, I think that one of the things that I found out in the sense of going to Israel and spending some 15 days there in 1987 was the tremendous beauty of that country, the tremendous massiveness of a nation that was vibrant with growth, and seeing people working together to take take a desert piece of desert land and bring topsoil there, and make an oasis out of the middle of a desert. It inspired me, and it was because people were working together. I think that for us, I think that and but what I also saw was the Eastern Bedouin shepherd. Unlike the Western shepherd drives his sheep with sheepdogs, but the Eastern shepherd, the sheep follow him. And
Yeah.
I found out when I was there that the reason why, and this is why Jesus has this wonderful teaching about shepherds, but the reason why is because I found out that physiologically sheep are short sighted. They cannot see very far. And the shepherd now leads them, and they trust the shepherd because the shepherd lives among them, not above them or beyond them. And so I say to us as shepherds that coming together also should remind us that we have flocks of sheep in our congregation. That's what they are. They really are human sheep with short-sightedness. And God holds us responsible as prophet, preachers, proclaimers of his word to let the people see farther than their nose. And in whatever way we can do that, whether it's a gentle sermon, sharing, you know, some words of truth, whether it's us coming together as we are today and letting our people see that we have a friendship and not just a professional relationship, whatever way we can make people understand that united we stand, divided we fall. I think that in whatever way you feel comfortable in doing that, I think that that adds to the effort of making the changes that have to be made today. So they're my two things.
Well, thank you. And Fred, take us home.
Well, it was something that Farhan was saying about, the what I would call places of leverage. Finding those places where you can affect change, and it's not the loudest voice oftentimes that affects the change. It's the right application of pressure. But I think one of the things that I've learned over the last decade is to distrust shame and trust humility. And so the one thing that I think is really important here is if we're going to open up this box of a lot of shameful things, and it needs to be opened, I think we have to work hard to resist the temptation to add more shame, to afford one another the grace and dignity to change. And I just want one real quick story, because this meant a lot to me, and I remembered it this week. 30 years ago, I was in seminary, and I was talking to a classmate, and this was one of the most gentle, kind, loving guys that you could ever imagine. He's a pastor in Philadelphia right now, and his name is Kevin, and he was describing to me what happens to him when he walks down the street. That he said, women will clutch their purse tight, or people will go to the other side of the street instead of walking next to him. And I said, I don't understand. And Kevin said, well, I'm black. And what was so great was that he didn't take that moment to say, why are you so naive? Why are you so ignorant? But he slowly walked me through what that meant for him. And it could have been a shameful moment. Like, well, yeah, of course you don't understand. But instead it was, well, let me explain it to you. I'll walk you through this.
Yeah.
And that lesson has guided me for 30 years. And so I think I would just say, Eric, when we're opening up the scriptures right now, maybe if we could look for paths of dignity that we could offer to each other, that's my 2 cents.
Well, thank you all, and God and Facebook and Zoom willing, we'll be able to share this with our communities as well. Yeah, but really, this I can't imagine an hour better spent. I feel like I have much more support and direction after spending the time with all of you. So thank you all very, very much.
I was gonna say, I love how Eric was able to get out of the entire discussion by hosting it.
And he got it. And he got it free too.
Probably a couple sermon illustrations too for free.
I just want to find out when you're going to cook the next meal so that we can all enjoy it together and taste your culinary skills. That's what I want to know, Fred. See, that's
there's always room at the Gary table, Ron. But I got to tell you, it's a rough crowd. They come at the big topics really hard. So you will do fine.
Listen, I'm willing to take the chance for a good meal. Eric, thank you so much.
Thanks, Eric. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much
you.
for allowing us to be in this this discussion, and thank you for your foresight. I really appreciate you and bringing us all together. Yes, indeed.
Well, I appreciate that, and most sincerely, more than a few sermons out of this. I have learned as much in the last hour as in everything I've been studying for the last few weeks trying to figure this out. So thank you all.
Be well, Eric.
God bless you. Be well, all my brothers, and we'll get together real soon.
All right, God bless.
God bless.
It was great seeing you all.